Hey, you guys, I am a baby boomer, and I'm going to tell you, from my perspective, why the economy went and why the baby boomers were the only generation in US history to actually be sort of rich. So let's get into this video. But first, notice my pretty flowers and my candles. So technically, I'm not really a baby boomer because I'm from Germany and I learned English when I was 9 and moved to the US. But I do remember a time when employers paid healthcare for the whole family, pension, retirement funds, and all of that. And I remember seeing all the outsourcing that happened. Okay, so when I was a young mom in what was it like, in the late 80s, early 90s, there were men providing for an entire family on one income, men that didn't even have a college education. One of my friends was married to a guy who worked for the Postal Service, and he worked overtime. He made so much money with the overtime. They had health care for the whole family. He had a pension, and he had well, he did work overtime, but they had a couple of kids, and they had a little house, and she was a stay-at-home mom. I knew other people like that. There were union jobs, manufacturing jobs, and men were making good money if they were willing to work many hours. Healthcare for the whole family. My ex-husband had healthcare for the whole family. He had a retirement plan. They were just phasing out pension plans. And the cost of housing was relatively cheap. A house typically would cost 2.5 times the median income of that city. We had a lot of manufacturing in the US. We had innovation, we had manufacturing. And I only know this because when I was a realtor, my real estate broker that I worked for, he was a few decades older than I, and he had worked in the manufacturing sector in the auto industry in the 70s. And he taught me a lot about what happened in the 70s and the big shift that happened in the 70s. And he worked in the US and in Europe. He was very good at, like, he would walk the manufacturing floor, he would listen to people, he would problem solve, and he would get to the bottom of things. He was an engineer. And that was at a time when engineers ran companies or were in charge of companies, and they valued the engineers, and he would turn these divisions around. And he said when they started outsourcing, that's when he said, we're going to have problems, because when you outsource the manufacture of the cars, you're also going to outsource the die maker, the tool maker. I forgot all the other stuff he said, but everybody who provides supplies and services to those companies. And when Bill Clinton signed NAFTA into law, and when they did the outsourcing, that was really the beginning of the end, because the companies were trying to get things made cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And so they went to other countries where the labor was cheaper, and at the same time, they not only created a loss of jobs in the United States for those particular products, but all the inputs that went into those products, and there were a lot of people involved. I don't know about tool making and die making and all of that, but it's all related. Okay, so we have outsourcing. The other thing he told me, and his name was Bob, he was such a great mentor to me, I have to say. So smart and honest and driven. Just like at Boeing, they had engineers in charge of Boeing. Okay, so what Bob told me, and I won't give his last name because, he doesn't know I'm making these videos. I haven't talked to him in years. But he said the problems with products started when the bean counters took over from the engineers. So the bean counters being the accountants, the MBAs. Just like we hear now at Boeing, it was the MBAs that took over when the engineers used to be the ones who ran Boeing. And one example he gave me was like in the 70s, the back of the car on the bumper, they had a thing called a stabilizer. So if you were hit or you skid, the stabilizer would, if you, I'm not a car person. I think if you, something that keeps you from skidding, if you suddenly break or get hit, I don't know what, it's called a stabilizer. And the bean counters, like, oh, we're going to save money, we're going to make more money, we're going to take that out. No one needs that. They start taking out things. They start making things cheaper to increase the profits of the company. And so the product quality went way down. And the US cars, which were once like the envy of the world, became crap. No one wanted to buy US cars anymore. They were all started buying Toyota, Honda. Those were the good cars. The Japanese cars became the good cars because the American cars became crap because they were cutting corners on everything just to make more money. And that's what's happened at Boeing. That's why we've had all those problems with the Boeing planes. And it's not just Boeing. I'm going to give you an example from my own life. So right now, I am recording this video on my Samsung S10. I have 3 phones. Probably shouldn't tell you guys that, but okay, I have 3 phones. So this is my Samsung S10, which is probably 4 or 5 years old. I don't know exactly. But I have tried different phones over. Well, I have it just for fans. You guys know that. So I've tried different phones. I have my Samsung S21, and I hate that phone. It's a much newer phone, but they no longer have a SIM card, so you can't increase the memory because they want you to keep upgrading. And the phone constantly prevents me from uploading stuff. I have to constantly clear the cache. I have to constantly take out the SIM card, put it back in. So I got a Google Pixel phone, and that's just worthless. I don't like it at all. This is my best phone, so I started making videos again on my Samsung S10. It is so reliable. A few years ago, I upgraded to a bigger memory card. It has so much storage. It takes so much good videos. It's so reliable. And someone I know told me that he replaced his MacBook Pro, and he said the new one is just crap. They just make things cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Okay. All right. So in the 80s, when I graduated from college, my first job out of college, I made $27,000 a year as a quality assurance tester. It's all on my LinkedIn. You can look it up. The house my ex-husband and I bought was $55,000. We purposely bought a cheap house, a fixer-upper. Okay? The fixer-upper was equal to our annual income because he made $27,000, I made $27,000. The house was, it really was a fixer-upper. I hated that house. This is all in my book. He loved the house. Anyway, at that time in Phoenix, you could buy a house. You could get a pretty decent house really nice house for, double our income. We just chose to go cheaper. You can't do that anymore. Everything has gone up in price so much that it's really hard for people to even pay rent or buy a house anymore. Things were so much cheaper then. Like I said, I had a friend whose husband worked for the Postal Service, and they had 3 kids, and she was a stay-at-home mom. And sure, he worked a lot of overtime, but UPS driver, postal worker, there were a lot of union jobs, manufacturing jobs, and all these guys made enough money to buy houses and support a whole family. What happened over the years? Okay, so we had the outsourcing in order to make more profit. We had cutting the quality of products. It was all about increasing profit. And then they got really creative. They started, at one time, okay, I forgot to tell you guys this. At one time, companies would take their profits and they would invest it into the company for research and development to make better products. Or they would invest it in training for their employees. Or the government would invest in infrastructure, like when they built the dams or they built the highways, or they would invest, research and development, capital, infrastructure, like more buildings, more automation. And over the years, they just stopped doing that. They just started outsourcing everything to other places. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's just, it's just part of life, I guess. And they started cutting corners, and they started putting the bean counters. They started putting the profits above the product. That's what they did. And this could be part of the decline of empires, part of the capitalist system, but that's what happened. I remember when we made good products. I had a vacuum cleaner and I bought it used. Okay, it was a Hoover vacuum cleaner. We were very poor, okay, when I got married. Like, we didn't use credit to buy stuff. We were very poor. Like, the first few months in our house, we slept on the mattress that the previous owner left. My ex-husband built our furniture. I painted the house. We did everything. Okay. I forgot what I was going to say. So companies were investing their money in research and development. The whole country, whether it was a company or the government, were investing their money in the people, the education, the infrastructure, expansion, automation. And then everything started becoming not so much about the product, but about the profit. When the profit became the main motivator, we really lost our way. And when we went off the gold standard, I think we had to put the profit and all that first because, see, every time we had an asset bubble, they didn't want it to normalize. They kept propping it up. So that was a big problem. I know I'm going off on a tangent right now because there's so many factors to this, but when the housing bubble burst in 2006, they should have let it crash, but they couldn't because they were afraid the whole system would go down and the rich people would go down. But we are still suffering from the after effects of not letting things normalize because healthy economies have boom and bust cycles, and the whole world has been afraid of the bust. They don't want the bust, so they keep propping it up, and that's why we have inflation. But also people started preferring the profit over the product, and over the people. And one time, like in my ex-husband, where the company he worked for was a big company, they used to have a thing called profit sharing. Even at my company, they had profit sharing. They wanted the employees to feel like part of the family. And it used to be that, I know people my age whose parents really were the actual baby boomers. I'm at the tail end. They worked for the railroad or whatever, and they got nice, big, fat pensions. These people are living it up, and they just had regular jobs. They were not like high up. And they got these pensions, and that all really just went away. Oh gosh, I'm all over the place. But see, the companies that had pension plans, they invested their money in these vehicles that were supposed to offer a high return, very risky vehicles. Some of these pension funds invested in mortgage-backed securities, which the rating agencies rated them. And as a farce, come on, you all had to know this was a bunch of crap debt. They rated them AAA. And that was BS. They should have been sued. No one ever sued them, to my knowledge. They rated them as AAA, and then when the whole housing market imploded, they kind of became worthless, I think. I shouldn't even be making this video without having my facts straight. But nonetheless, the problem is that all of these pension funds were investing in vehicles. They were overpromising, investing in things that was like, 10% return, and they weren't putting in enough money. And all of these pension funds are really insolvent. The baby boomers were the last generation, or maybe the only generation in this country that was promised all this stuff, and it was all done on a house of cards. So the baby boomers really benefited from a boom time unlike we have seen in a really long time, and I don't think we will see again, because it was all built on a house of cards that has been disassembled, more or less, because it's not sustainable. I really should get my facts straight. I'm not an economist. I'm just trying to kind of outline to you a few things that life has always been hard for people on this planet. And like Eckhart Tolle says, life is a challenge. And for some people, it's more of a challenge than others. My life actually happens to be pretty easy. So I am kind of like looking out at this as like, not as being in pain, but seeing that all of this makes no sense at all, and that it's really unfair, and I don't like it. And I remember a time when life was easier for people, when people retired, they had money, they owned their own homes, and now it's really hard for young people to own their homes. College has gotten more and more expensive. When I went to college, I had a Pell Grant. The Pell Grant paid for my entire tuition, and I lived at home. How many people can do that today? Not that many. Everything has gotten more and more expensive, and I just wanted to kind of outline to you guys how life used to be. I should just start this video over. Should I start this video over? This is like a real life moment. Okay, if you're still watching at this point, I just want to make a video about why the baby boom generation had it so easy. They happened to be born at a time when companies were really flush in money. Due to going off the gold standard was probably one reason. And they were helping their employees participate in the gains of their productivity. So employees were valued. They had pensions, health care, and retirement plans. And they would work for the same company for maybe 20 years. That's what I was going to say. They would work for a company for 20 years, for a lifetime. It was loyalty to the company was valued. There were also unions, and there was always tension between unions and the companies, but employees were valued. Now companies, when I was laid off, and this was back in 1991, I'd already had my daughter. I'd gone back to work part-time. And I remember it was Valentine's Day, 1992, when I had a phone call that I was laid off. They had eliminated my entire department, the testing department. And that's it. I think they gave me a week's severance pay or something. I don't even remember. But all the people that were there at the time, or at that time when people were laid off, they would just be told they were laid off and escorted out of the building because they didn't want people to retaliate. There was nothing about a 2-week notice. There was nothing like, we as employees always felt like, okay, we have to give you a 2-week notice so you can find a replacement. They didn't give I'm trying not to use cursey words. They didn't care about a replacement. They wanted to we were just expendable. We became more and more expendable. At one time, employees were valued. They had health care for the family, they had profit sharing, they had pensions, and then they became more and more devalued. It started out with your family can no longer be in your plan, and now you have to pay a copay, and there is no more pension, and there's a 401k profit sharing, and now you have to be vested, and now we're going to just let you go like that. So you can be as loyal as you want to this company, but they're not loyal to you. People start treating each other as more disposable. And that's why I think people have a harder time forming relationships, because the whole society has become more and more disposable. And I think it started with the companies. It used to be that the neighborhood, the community, the company was a stable force, like stability, and you could buy a house with 2.5 times your annual income. That's all gone. It's all about Wall Street making more money. And the other thing I want to say is, I remember when Well, when I first got started in investing, and I'm not like very knowledgeable about this at all, but I read John Bogle's book. He's the founder of Vanguard, and I got into index funds in the 80s. And it used to be like Peter Lynch wrote a book. I forgot what it's called, but it's like find a good company, buy stock in it, and you're buying a piece of that company. You're buying future profits of that company. That's also what Warren Buffett talked about. But then it started becoming that these investment companies and these mutual funds, it was no longer like buying part of a company. It was all about electronic trading. Wall Street became not about a place to gather money to invest in companies that wanted to expand. That's what companies used to issue stock for. They wanted to expand. They wanted to get money so they could expand their business. It all became about driving the profit. It all became a roulette wheel. It all became like a casino. That's why I don't trust the stock market. I do not trust the stock market. It is a freaking house of cards, and I think it's being artificially propped up. I'm very risk averse. I know. Those of you who've made money in the stock market are telling me I'm just a fear monger. I used to be in the stock market for 20 years. I am so disillusioned. After the internet bubble and after Alan Greenspan said housing prices will never go down, they all lied to us. I'm like, you're lying to us. They pretended they didn't know. They want to keep everything artificially propped up. So then companies that once used their profits to expand to other locations, buy more manufacturing equipment, give profit sharing to their employees, hire more people, do training. You know what they started doing? Around the bean counter days, they started using their profits, huge sums of profit that these companies have been making, to purchase their own stock. And that's when the evil, in my opinion, really started happening. The evil, which was just about, let's enrich ourselves. Fuck the consumer. I'm going to use the word fuck now, even though fucking is something that's pleasurable. I shouldn't even use the word fuck. I'm like, screw the consumer. Screw the employees. Now our mission is to make profit no matter what. That's what happened at Boeing. That's what happened to a lot of these companies. They stopped caring about the employees. They stopped caring about the product they made. And it was all about increasing the share price. So they took the companies started taking all of their profits, which once went to the employees, okay, help them buy houses and things like that. And they used that money to buy their own stock. Now, why would a company buy its own stock? Because that would reduce the number of stock and it would increase the share price of each stock. And who benefits from that? The people who own the stock, mostly the executives. Okay? So they stopped caring about the quality and it was all about making money. And like Sagar on Breaking Point said recently, Boeing is profit sharing. Let's see, their mission is to increase their profit sharing or something like that. It's not to make a good plane anymore. It used to be run by engineers, but not anymore. So that is a huge problem. And all of these hedge funds that have all of this money, this is the really sad thing though, okay? This is really sad. I almost feel like I want to cry, but I'm not. All these hedge funds that have all this money, whatever, billions or trillions, I have no idea how much money they have. They want to make a return on their money for their investors, right? Or for themselves. It saddens me that the best thing they can do with their money, the best opportunity for return, is buying residential real estate. That is really, really a big fucking wake-up call to all of us, how bad this economy really is, when the best thing that these guys can do is buy residential real estate. They're not building infrastructure. They're not investing in improving our education. American education is very bad. I went to school in Germany for many years. American education is very bad. They're not investing in research and development, on building more manufacturing, nothing like that. Okay, they don't care. They're investing their money in speculation, in stock buybacks, and in residential real estate. Like, what the heck? That's supposed to be for people. You're a hedge fund. Don't you have commercial things to do, government infrastructure things to do, resource extraction, oil drilling, whether you're for it or against it? I'm just saying, like, something more meaningful, productive. No, they can't do that. I feel like this is a rant video. Probably not one of my best videos. Another problem, this is a rant video. We used to have these regulatory agencies to keep all these power mongers in check. We had the FDA, the CDC, whatever, all these regulatory agencies. Well, they've all been co-opted. There's a revolving door that's allowed between Congress and these regulatory agencies. So if you're a congressperson, you're not going to oversee the pharmaceutical companies. Why would you? If you're a general in the military, you're not going to say anything bad about the military contractors and companies, because when you retire, you're going to get a seat on the board. And you're going to get a public speaking spot at one of these cable news stations. There's a revolving door between the regulatory agencies and the government agencies, so that the regulatory agencies no longer protect us. That's how the CDC and the FDA were co-opted during the COVID lockdown. Co-opted, okay? It was all bullshit. By the way, I never got the jab, okay? It was all bullshit to scare us. Yes, COVID was real. People died from it, but only the very sick people died from it. It wasn't this big scary thing, but I digress. There's a revolving door, GMOs, whatever the thing is, Boeing, they no longer are there to look out for our best interest. When I was in college, there was a thing called Consumer Reports that tested products. I don't even know if that still exists. Another big change is that when I was a young wife, cars were still very easy to work on. Like, my ex-husband would work on the cars. He would change the oil, change the brakes. He would be able to fix a lot of things on our cars. You can't really do that anymore. They made the cars all automatic and very hard to work on. And like, when I was a young wife, we had our separated roles, which I liked. He did. I helped a lot with the yard work too, believe me. We did a lot of house improvement projects, but he did most of the stuff, like handyman stuff. He knows his way. He always had like a workbench, a work area. He knows his way around with tools, working things, doing home improvement projects, pretty big ones. And I would be more like the person inside with the kids and the cooking and the cleaning. And I like that. I don't think you can do that anymore. It's become so that few people can own a house. And owning a house is a good thing because you have to fix up things. You have to paint, repair, do yard work. You have a pride of ownership. And a lot of people don't get to experience that. Working on cars, it's harder to work on cars anymore because it's all electronic. So a lot of people can't work on their own cars anymore. So the boomers also had it better because the stock market gains were like really big in those years. The money that we earned was enough to buy a house and still be able to save. Our companies were matching. A lot of governments were matching. If you worked for the government, they were matching. Of course, a lot of that money, I don't see. What also happened is that the pension funds, like, there was a lot of, I don't know if they're properly funded. I just really think I just think the whole financial system is a house of cards. I'm very risk averse. People are always telling me, Sharza, you should trust the stock market. I'm like, I don't trust it because I see it's a house of cards. It's not sustainable. I saw what happened during the housing bubble when it burst, that the banks were prevented from marking these assets down to their real value, and the government propped it up. See, the house prices in 2006 should have fallen back to baseline, but the Federal Reserve stepped in and propped it up, and they've been propping up everything. That's another thing that I don't trust. Why are they propping everything up? Because they can't afford to let it go to baseline. They don't want it to go to baseline. We need another Great Depression for everything to normalize so then we can build it back up. Anyway, I think a lot of people are suffering now because they compare themselves to how easy their parents had it and their grandparents had it, even though the grandparents lived through the Great Depression, which was really hard. But the boomer generation was the most spoiled generation in history, I want to say, and I do not know if we will see anything like that again, because it would require all of these companies to stop being so selfish. It would require a return of assets to baseline. It would require these hedge funds and investment companies to actually invest in this country instead of investing in real estate, which is meant to be for people. That is the most pathetic thing of all, that hedge funds think that their best investment opportunity is in buying houses that are built for families. That is the saddest fact of all. And I'm going to end the video with that because this is just kind of like a depressing rant video. That's why we really need to step in and get some new candidates on the ballot, because the shit show we have in Washington, D.C., Biden and Trump are both a shit show. None of them are doing anything different from what it was. When Trump, I don't care if you like Biden or Trump, none of them stopped the wars, changed any of these systems that I'm talking about. And maybe nobody can. Maybe we are just, going the natural route of an empire in decline. So, I think all we can do is, take care of ourselves, because the system is fucked. When the hedge funds think that their best investment option is buying residential real estate, that's really sad, you guys. I'm not going to try to be uplifting here. I'm going to upload this anyway. It's probably really depressing, but oh well.